Have you ever noticed how you can, completely forgive a struggling friend for giving you a cheap birthday gift?
Oh yeah, you just brush it off. You do not even think twice about it.
Right. You tell yourself it is the thought that counts. But then you secretly resent a wealthy friend if they do not pick up the dinner tab.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like a massive personal slight.
Exactly. If that friend with the six-figure salary splits the restaurant bill down to the cent, it just stings.
It really does. It feels toxic, honestly.
Well, welcome to your custom-tailored deep dive here on the Simplified Summary YouTube channel. Today, our mission is to unpack exactly that uncomfortable psychological phenomenon.
And we are doing that by looking at a really profound, bite-sized story.
We are. But really quick before we jump in, we humbly ask our listeners to subscribe to the channel. Also, please do not forget to like this video and share your valuable comment down below. It really helps out.
As we love reading the comments.
So today, we are providing a full summary and analysis of a story by the legendary Hindi author Premchand. It is titled Samasya, which translates to the problem.
Right, and this is from his very famous collection called Mansarovar.
Yes, so Premchand was, he was kind of a master of the character study, right?
He really was, especially when it came to highlighting these stark social and economic realities of early 20th century Indian society.
And our goal today is to dissect his observations in this specific text. We want to reveal a very uncomfortable problem regarding human nature.
Yeah, a problem about wealth and just the really heavy, often toxic weight of our own expectations.
So let us get right into it. The story opens by introducing us to the setting, which is this office space.
A very typical bureaucratic office environment.
Exactly. And specifically, we are introduced to the titular character of this study. He is an office peon named Gareeb.
And it is worth noting the name Gareeb literally translates to poor.
Right. And the narrator immediately points out that Gareeb embodies this phrase, Yatha named Tathagun.
Which basically means his qualities perfectly match his name.
Yeah. He is just the absolute personification of poverty and submissiveness. The text actually says he is incredibly simple and entirely obedient.
He just absorbs scoldings with total silence, like a sponge.
It is wild. The narrator mentions he has been working at this office for a year, and Gareeb has not missed a single day.
No, one.
But he is always there exactly at 9 a.m., and he just sits in his specific spot on this torn rug.
He blends in so completely that he almost seems like an architectural feature of the building itself.
Okay, let us unpack this, because there is something deeply tragic about that description.
Oh, for sure.
It is like Gareeb is the invisible infrastructure of a modern workspace. Think about the Wi-Fi or the plumbing in your office.
That is a great comparison. You never think about the plumbing unless it breaks.
Exactly. You only ever notice it if it isn't functioning perfectly. When it works, it is totally invisible.
Right. And by treating Gareeb that way, the office essentially strips away his entire humanity. He is just a utility.
So why does he take it? Why is he so compliant?
Well, treating a human being as mere utility is a super common byproduct of strict hierarchical systems. And what is fascinating here is why this extreme compliance exists in him.
It is a defense mechanism, right?
Fundamentally, yes. It is a survival mechanism. When you operate at the absolute bottom of a social and economic hierarchy, like a peon in a bureaucratic office, invisibility is often your safest strategy.
Because being noticed is usually a bad thing?
Exactly. Being noticed means being reprimanded or given more work or just exploited. So that torn rug is his designated space, and his silence is basically his armor.
That makes a lot of sense. And the text actually gives us a really sharp contrast right next to Gareeb.
Oh, the other peon.
Yeah, there are 4 peons in total, and one of them is a Muslim man whom the entire office inexplicably fears.
Right, the text never actually explicitly explains why they fear him.
It doesn't, but the inclusion of that detail feels super vital for analyzing the power dynamics at play here.
It definitely highlights that even at the absolute lowest rung of the workplace ladder, fear and intimidation still dictate how people are treated.
So the office staff just walk all over Gareeb because his demeanor allows it.
Precisely. And they give the other peon a wide berth out of this perceived threat. It proves that the treatment of these men is not just about their job title.
Right, it is not just about their economic status.
No, it is about the psychological posturing within that specific space. Gareeb has chosen, or, well, been forced by circumstance into the posture of a doormat.
His silence invites their disregard. But his invisibility does not exist in a vacuum. It kind of forces us to ask how the people stepping on him view their own status.
And that transitions us perfectly to the Bait Babu.
Yes, the head clerk of the office.
Yeah.
So out of nowhere, he suddenly delivers this philosophical monologue that just fundamentally changes how we understand the interactions in that space.
He drops a massive truth bomb about wealth.
He really does. He argues that gifts do not actually save or elevate anyone. They merely reveal the giver's heart.
But his core argument, and this is crucial, is that people only place expectations on those who are capable.
Yeah, the exact quote is, what can one expect from a naked person?
It is such a stark metaphor, but it perfectly encapsulates his point. If an individual has nothing, society demands nothing of them.
So poverty acts as a shield.
Exactly. It is a shield against the expectations of others. But the moment someone acquires wealth or capability, that shield completely drops.
Here is where it gets really interesting. The head clerk goes even further. He claims that everyone is the secret enemy of the prosperous.
Both the small people and the big people alike.
Right. And he uses the example of in-laws to prove this point, which is just so relatable.
It really is.
He says, if your in-laws are poor, you expect absolutely nothing from them. If they visit and do not bring anything, you easily forgive them.
You might even feel like magnanimous about your own patience.
Yeah. But if your in-laws are wealthy, and they fail to send you traditional, expensive gifts for major festivals like Tej and Choth.
The Bait Babu says, snakes roll on your chest.
Snakes roll on your chest. What a phrase.
It is a brilliant cultural metaphor for intense, burning, venomous jealousy.
It really captures that physical tightening, that toxic feeling of being slighted.
And the slight does not come from a direct injury. It comes from the withholding of a resource you felt entitled to.
Okay, wait. I have to challenge the head clerk here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't it just basic social etiquette that the friend with the six-figure salary picks up the tab? Or that the wealthy in-laws send the nicer gifts?
I mean, socially, yes.
Why is it toxic to expect those with abundance to share it? We are social creatures. Sharing resources is how societies function.
That is a fair point.
So I'm not sure I buy the idea that expecting generosity makes you a secret enemy.
Well, if we look at the evolutionary psychology behind resource sharing, your pushback makes perfect sense.
Right.
Yeah, in early human hunter-gatherer societies, survival literally depended on the successful hunters sharing the meat.
So it is hardwired into us.
Exactly. When someone with abundance hoards it, it triggers a primal alarm in the rest of the group. It feels like a literal threat to survival.
Because if they do not share, we starve.
Right. We evolved to track reciprocity. However, the head clerk is exposing how this evolutionary wiring misfires in modern stratified societies.
Misfires how, exactly?
What we perform an internal audit of everyone we meet. We calculate what the other person can afford to give us.
Oh, wow.
The toxicity arises because we do not base our expectations on the other person's actual willingness to give or our actual need for the resource.
We base it solely on our calculation of their net worth.
Precisely.
So we are secretly taxing our friends based on their income bracket and then enforcing that tax with our emotional reactions.
That is exactly what we are doing.
That is wild. So the anger we feel when the wealthy in-laws do not send the festival gifts isn't actually about the gifts themselves.
Not at all. It is about the perceived violation of an unwritten social contract that says, if you have more, you owe me more.
And when that unwritten contract is breached, the emotional fallout is severe.
It is. And to prove this isn't just some modern workplace grievance or, petty office politics, the head clerk roots his argument in ancient mythology.
Yeah, he demonstrates that this Samasya, this problem, is baked into the very core of the human condition.
He brings up one of the most famous stories of friendship in Indian mythology, the story of Krishna and Sudama.
Right. And for those who might not know, Sudama was a desperately impoverished childhood friend of Krishna.
Very impoverished.
Yeah. While Sudama lived in rags, struggling to feed his family, Krishna grew up to become a legendary king and a deity.
Living in a literal golden palace in Dwarka.
Exactly. So in the myth, Sudama's wife finally convinces him to visit Krishna to ask for financial help.
And Sudama is super hesitant about it.
Very hesitant. And all he has to offer the great king is a small handful of beaten rice tied in a rag.
So the head clerk uses this specific dynamic to make his point about expectations. He observes that we are happy and completely satisfied with a single betel leaf, a simple pan from a poor friend.
We just accept it with love and grace.
Right. But if a rich friend doesn't offer us a lavish feast, we are deeply insulted.
It is like going over to a billionaire friend's house and they only offer you tap water. The perceived stinginess feels like a personal attack.
That is a perfect modern equivalent. So the head clerk concludes that if Sudama had traveled all the way to Krishna's golden palace, and Krishna had welcomed him warmly, but ultimately sent him home empty-handed.
Without any financial aid.
Exactly. Then Sudama would have harbored an intense hatred for him. In fact, the clerk says Sudama would have hated Krishna more than Krishna's legendary mortal enemies.
The warlords Shishupala and Jarasandha.
Yes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really explains why the betrayal of an expectation from a friend hurts significantly more than the predictable malice of an enemy.
Absolutely. Shishupala and Jarasandha were enemies. Their hatred was a known quantity. They operated exactly as expected.
But a friend with immense resources who withholds them commits a psychological betrayal.
Right. The head clerk forces the listener and the narrator of the story to evaluate whether their friendships are based on genuine affection or on transactional expectations calibrated to the other person's wealth.
Okay, so the narrator has been listening to this entire philosophical breakdown. He has absorbed this theory about hidden wealth, capacity, and the toxic expectations of society.
And this is where the story takes a deeply uncomfortable turn.
It really does. Because instead of reflecting on his own sense of entitlement or feeling empathy for the pressures placed on the wealthy,
He applies this profound insight directly to Gareeb.
the invisible peon on the torn rug. And he does not do this to understand Gareeb better. He does it to investigate him.
The narrator decides to test the theory in real time. He suddenly looks at the ultra-poor Gareeb through a new, highly suspicious lens.
It is so cynical.
It is. The narrator's internal logic just twists the head clerk's philosophy. He starts wondering if Gareeb is hiding his capacity.
Like, if expectations only fall on the capable, perhaps Gareeb is pretending to be incapable to avoid the tax of the office.
Exactly. So days later, the narrator confronts Gareeb and begins interrogating him,
He asks, point blank, do you have any farming at home?
which is a massive shift in the power dynamic.
Oh, huge. The narrator, who is a relatively comfortable clerk, is suddenly prying into the personal finances of the lowest-ranking employee in the building, a man he previously treated like the office plumbing.
And Gareeb responds with extreme, self-deprecating humility. The text refers to his state as Deen Bhav, which is like a feeling of wretchedness or absolute submission.
Right. Gareeb replies, yes, sir, your two slaves do it.
He is referring to his own sons, his own family members working their small plot of land, but he calls them the narrator's slaves.
That linguistic submission is just jarring. Calling your own children the slaves of a middle management clerk is a heavy, heavy thing to say.
This raises an important question about language and oppression. Gareeb's choice of words is a preemptive defense mechanism.
How so?
By lowering himself and his family so far to the ground, he is trying to ensure he cannot be stepped on any harder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he is verbally reinforcing his own incapability to the narrator.
So Gareeb does admit to having a small farm, and he admits to having 2 buffaloes, but he immediately qualifies it.
Right. He insists the cows aren't pregnant yet, so there's no milk.
He claims his family survives purely on the grace and religion of people. He is desperately downplaying whatever tiny, meager assets he possesses.
And then the narrator drops the hammer.
He really does. He asks Gareeb this pointed, loaded question. Do you ever treat the baboose of the office?
Meaning, do you ever bring us gifts or milk or food from your farm?
It is so ironic. The narrator has just sat through a brilliant sociological lecture about how people unjustly demand things from others the moment they perceive they have resources.
He intellectually understands the toxic nature of this entitlement.
Yet his immediate action is to dig around to find out if the poorest man in his vicinity secretly has a tiny bit of capacity, specifically so he can demand a piece of it.
He tries to exploit the very man he previously ignored. The narrator couldn't extract anything from a naked person, so he went searching to see if Gareeb was secretly hiding a watch.
It is so gross, honestly, but it forces an entire reevaluation of Gareeb's character.
It really does. Throughout the beginning of the story, Gareeb is presented as simple, almost intellectually blank.
But does Gareeb downplay his modest farm out of mere habit, or out of a sharp, finely honed protective instinct?
It is highly probable that Gareeb already understands the Samasya, the problem, far better than the intellectual clerks do.
Because he lives it.
Exactly. He knows that the very moment the office staff realizes he has milk or crops or a few extra rupees, they will expect him to give it to them for free.
They will feel entitled to the fruits of his family's labor simply because they hold a higher social standing.
Yes. His poverty, or at least his meticulous performance of absolute destitution, is the only shield protecting him from their parasitism.
If he admits to having any surplus at all, he becomes capable. And if he becomes capable, he is subject to the toxic expectations the head clerk described.
Right. If Gareeb has a successful harvest and doesn't bring the office clerks a treat, suddenly he becomes the villain.
Snakes will roll on their chests.
Exactly. Premchand uses this brief interaction to show that this problem isn't just about the wealthy being envied. It is a systemic rot where human value is entirely replaced by extractable value.
The narrator doesn't suddenly see Gareeb as a fellow human being with a farm, a family, and a life outside the office.
No, he just sees him as a potential source of free dairy.
Wow. So we started by looking at Gareeb as a piece of invisible office furniture. Then we explored the head clerk's theory that capability breeds entitlement and turns friends into secret enemies.
And finally, we watch the narrator weaponize that very theory against the most vulnerable person in the room, proving the theory right in the most cynical way possible.
Samasya ultimately reveals that our judgments of others, whether they are a wealthy friend, our in-laws, or the office peon, are almost entirely shaped by our own entitled expectations of their capacity.
Rather than their actual moral worth or our shared humanity, we constantly audit the people around us.
We judge people by what they can do for us, and we punish them emotionally if they fail to meet a standard we invented in our own heads based on their perceived wealth.
It is a really sobering thought to take away from such a short story.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to consider a different angle on this dynamic. Think about your own life, not in terms of what you expect from others, but what they expect from you.
That is a great flip.
How often do you actively downplay your own successes, your own wealth, or your own capabilities just to avoid triggering the toxic expectations of your friends and family?
Are you out there pretending your cows do not have milk, just so your social circle does not demand a glass?
It is something to think about until next time. And again, if you enjoyed this video, please humbly subscribe to the Simplified Summary channel, like, and comment. Thanks for joining us.